Hi, I'm Professor Hitch, and today I want to talk to you about introductions. I'm going to divide this into three parts. I think most introductions have at least three parts to them. First, I want to talk to you about hooks. Then I want to talk to you about the actual introduction material of your introduction. How do you introduce your essay? And then we'll finish up with thesis statements at the end, although perhaps I won't spend too much time on that. That, frankly, is a whole nother video. So to start, let's talk about hooks. How do you get somebody interested in your essay? Should you even be thinking about that? It's understandable to think when you're writing an essay that you don't owe it to the reader to get them interested. After all, your reader is often your English professor. It might be me. And you might very well say, well, Professor Hitch, you wanted to read it. Here it is. But I want to tell you right now, hooks are very important. They're one of the things that separates a good essay from a great essay. A good essay just follows all the rules, gets to the end, makes a good point, done. A great essay takes the time to get you emotionally invested in whatever it is you're writing. So how do you get that person emotionally invested? Well, I think you have a couple different strategies. Strategy number one, you can start with a narrative. It can be a narrative related to your topic. It can be a personal story of some kind. I think you have some flexibility here. It can also be something that you completely made up, which is crazy, I know. If you are choosing to make up a story completely from scratch, try to follow the rules of good narrative composition. Make sure that this is a story that's worth telling, because a poorly told story has the potential to kind of blow up in your face a little bit. It can make the writer look a little bit biased. It doesn't quite sound right. So with hooks, you can try to begin with a story. With hooks, you can also begin with a quote. The jury's kind of out on this one. I know that there are other professors out there who don't think too kindly about starting with a quote, but I would edit what it is they're saying and tell you all this. It's not so much that you can't start with a quote, it's that you can't start with a bad quote. If you're going to quote something, find something really juicy, something that's kind of shocking even maybe, and share that thing. And if you can't get to that occasion, if you can't figure out that really juicy quote that you want to share with your reader, then that's a sign that maybe you shouldn't be quoting. And to that same effect, I would say you can start with a question. Yes, you may have heard from other teachers that you shouldn't be starting with questions, but I'll say the same thing about that I did about quoting. Don't start with bad questions. One of the worst questions I ever read at the start of an essay was a student who started his essay by saying, and I kid you not, "Have you ever considered going to college?" I have multiple graduate degrees. The answer is yes. I did consider going to college. I came, I saw, I conquered, done. So that's not going to work as far as the questions go. But on the flip side, I think there are a lot of really strong questions that you can ask to get the reader engaged in your essay. The strongest question that I can ever remember reading, and this was actually not a student, to be fair, this was a news article, and yet it was still such a mind-blowing question. The question was, why are hundreds of thousands of people driving around with live explosives in their car? Am I one of those people? I read that question and immediately I was hyper-focused on whatever it was they were going to say next, because I wanted to know, am I one of those people? Do I not understand what's going on in my car? And of course, the answer to that, for anyone who's curious, is Toyota airbags. Yeah, you got to watch out for those. Some of them are defective, and they do have the explosive force to really seriously injure you if they go off at the wrong time. So to review, for hooks, there are three kinds of hooks we've talked about so far. You can start with a narrative, you can start with a quote, or you can also start with a question. Keep in mind, if you're starting with a quote or a question, that it should be a strong quote or question. In addition to those three strategies, begin with a provocative statement. Depending on your creativity, depending on how much time you have, you really may only be able to pump out just like a very sort of provocative saying, something to challenge your reader a little bit. So let's say that you're writing about college tuition. You might start by saying something like, college tuition is too damn low. Yeah, that's provocative. That's going to get me reading. I'm going to want to know what happens next after that, because that conflicts with the way that I see the world. So that's an example of a provocative statement. So that covers hooks. Then we jump over into the actual introduction content, like what goes in an introduction. When I think about what goes in an introduction, the very first thing that comes into my mind is there anything that my reader needs to know about my topic? At first glance, you might think, no, like this is such an obvious, easy topic, but consider for a moment the following. If you're writing about yourself, how much does your reader know about you? There may be some things you're going to want to share. If you're writing about something that you've researched, even though because of that research, this is now like such an obvious thing for you, is it gonna be obvious to somebody who maybe didn't do that research? There may be some context from that research that you want to throw into your introduction. Above and beyond talking about yourself, above and beyond researching though, your reader just might not know very much. Don't take chances. I mean, when in doubt, you want to put that information in the introduction. The great thing about an introduction is, even if you think the value of what you're saying is maybe only so-so, you're not really saying anything too interesting, that's okay. You haven't even started your essay yet. Your essay doesn't really start until the thesis statement. So say your boring stuff now so that when you do start talking about the interesting stuff later, your reader's going to have that context. Your reader's going to know. In addition to providing the very necessary context to read your essay, other things you may want to consider in your introduction would be not so much context of what you're writing about, but perhaps history. So where was your topic before you started writing about it? If you're writing about the drinking age today, what was the drinking age 50 years ago? That's not necessarily something I need to understand your topic today, but having that historical context is really interesting, and it's important, I think. You may want to explain your topic a little bit. I read an essay about Halo ice cream, and I had always wondered how Halo ice cream has such low calorie count. I've actually had Halo ice cream, and for whatever reason, I just wasn't observant enough to look and check out why it had such low calorie count. I had a student in her introduction write about Halo ice cream, and in her introduction very specifically, she mentioned that it's made with stevia instead of sugar, and I was like, oh my god, that totally explains everything. So you never know when providing like a little bit of extra context, be it about your topic, be it historical context, be it simply explaining what your topic is. You never know when that's going to make an impact with the reader. So you want to front load as much of that information as possible so that once you do get to your thesis, you're ready to go. Speaking of theses, and yes, that is the plural for thesis statements. Speaking of theses, what about those? Well, there's one classic way that I think a lot of us have been taught to do thesis statements, and that's the traditional 3-part thesis statement. You set up an argument, your argument has 3 reasons, you include all 3 reasons in your thesis statement. The drinking age should be lowered because of the army age, the smoking age, and because I said so. That third one's not a very good reason, but I'm making this up on the spot, so bear with me. That's an example of a 3-part thesis statement. 3-part thesis statements are okay. There's nothing wrong with them. But think of them like training wheels. You need them only up until the point that you're confident to work on things on your own instead. So you may find with your thesis statement that you only really have 2 main points, and if that's the case, that's fine. 2 main points it is, 2-point thesis statement. The important thing that you do in your thesis statement, regardless of kind of the shape that it takes, is you want to very clearly state your claim using as few words as possible. I have encountered students who have a tendency to write very long thesis statements, 3 lines, 4 lines. I've seen 5-line thesis statements. And to that, I would say, you may be trying to argue your essay before you've actually started arguing your essay. Your thesis statement only sets up the main controlling idea. You need to leave it up to the bodies of your essay to actually elaborate on that controlling idea and sort of make it make sense. In addition to that, when your thesis statement is 5 lines long, that is 5 lines that I might get lost in. Any of those 5 lines. And as soon as they do, you've kind of screwed up the whole essay. If I don't understand your thesis statement, I don't understand where your bodied paragraphs are going. It's not connected anymore. The final piece of advice that I'll offer you about thesis statements is try to make sure that your thesis statements connect to your topic sentences. So if you're going to write a thesis statement with a keyword like drinking age, then at least one of your topic sentences should also have that same keyword, drinking age. And when you match up those words between your topic sentences and your thesis statement, that's what shows your reader, yes, I know what I'm talking about, this is my topic, and I'm going to keep going on it. I think that's it for now. Stay tuned for more on thesis statements in the future. I hope this was helpful.